Okay, and we're live. Welcome everybody. Maybe you are watching this video for the first time, your first video in the Leaders in the Force interview series. And if so, welcome. This interview series is aimed at hearing the perspectives of leaders that are out in the operational force from all branches. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from First Lieutenant Arnulfo Moran, who currently joins us from Fort Hood, Texas. Lieutenant Moran and I are classmates from West Point, and then we also went through the Infantry Basic Officer Leaders course together. So that should tell you guys he is an infantry officer. And then most recently, he just came back from Special Forces Assessment and Selection, and he will PCS to Fort Bragg in the coming months to start the SF qualification course. So, Arnie, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking your time to help mentor the next generation of leaders. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what motivated you to join the Army?
All right, sounds good. I'd like to start off by saying thank you for having me. I don't get to interact much with cadets or have that kind of influence as much as you do, but I appreciate the little bit of effort or work I can do to helping in whatever shape or form I can for future leaders to select the right choices, the right career paths. So to get started, as you stated, my name is Arnulfo Moran. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I graduated high school in 2012. After high school, I attended the West Point Prep School, followed by West Point. When I graduated in 2017 with a mechanical engineering degree. As far as the reason why I joined the Army, why I serve, I'd say from an early age, I've always had the desire and the want to serve in the armed forces. Initially, I wanted to enlist out of high school, but my parents wouldn't let me enlist. They said that I needed to attend college like my older brothers, which is why I ended up going to West Point to get a little bit of the enlistment side in some sense, in terms of growing up in the Army a little bit and getting some of that training, but also attending college and earning a bachelor's degree. So that's why I attended West Point, and I've done what I've done until now.
Okay, thank you. So I can relate. Like my parents wanted me to go to college. I knew that so I was born in Colombia, and being an immigrant, having a family of immigrants, it's a great sacrifice coming and starting a new life in a new country. So I knew that I had to honor that sacrifice by doing well in school, getting good grades, and finding my way to college. So I couldn't just not do that. So I can relate. And then for me as well, West Point was kind of the blend of call to service and then still being able to get that bachelor's degree. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Mechanical engineering, pretty impressive. And I'll hold on to that little bit of information and I'll ask you the next question. So, well, we already know your infantry because I mentioned it, I led with it, but why did you choose the infantry?
Why did I choose the infantry? I've always liked the idea of leading soldiers, potentially leading them in combat. If that was the choosing or what was to happen, and that's what I wanted to do. I don't think any other branch would allow me or give me the opportunity to lead soldiers the way the infantry branch, or being an infantry platoon leader or a leader within the infantry community will allow you to. And I just always wanted to do the hard stuff, the tough, realistic training, and to shoot guns, to shoot weapons. I've always had that desire, so I felt that was my calling.
Okay, so what stood out to me there is you always wanted to do the hard stuff. You wanted to seek a challenge and find fulfillment from choosing the tougher path. Mechanical engineering kind of says that to me. Like that's a pretty hard major, especially at West Point. So I want to talk about that for a little bit because a lot of people, a lot of cadets that I talk to, oh, I want to do something related to my major in the Army. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about that? Because there aren't really a lot of majors that directly translate to occupations in the military. So what would you say to somebody that has that concern?
So like you said, it was tough. I always had the desire to study mechanical engineering. I focused on automotives. I'm a big, car guy. I like to do everything myself on the vehicles. Um, and then you see the disparity between, studying something in engineering and then going and doing something in the infantry. Um, I'd say yes, there are some career paths within the army that, your major or what you study can translate into. But that shouldn't necessarily, drive your desire to ultimately do what you want to do. Ultimately, I knew I wanted to lead soldiers and do tough and realistic training that can be fun and shoot weapons and potentially lead soldiers in combat. And I knew infantry was definitely the route for that. So, um, I just, me personally, I think, once my career is done, wherever it ends up going, I think I can always go back to my mechanical engineering degree. I can, seek my master's in engineering or pursue other things if I'm interested in. Um, so I don't think it was necessarily, for me, uh, a desire to say that, hey, I study mechanical engineering, I should be a engineer officer. It just wasn't what I thought was the right decision for me.
Yeah, so I would like to caution the cadets, the viewers, who maybe like they have a different perception of what the engineer corps does, and they might feel like, oh, I'm majoring in engineering, I need to canalize myself into the engineer corps. I don't think, and I'll ask you, but I don't think a lot of engineers, officers at the company grade level, lieutenants and captains are like sitting behind or going over blueprints or plans, designing structures and stuff. It's a different type of engineering. It's um, combat engineering, demolitions, stuff like that. And across the enterprise, junior officers, we're tasked with leading organizations rather than being technicians. So I like that, you study mechanical engineering, but you want to get on the ground and do chase the opportunity that would give you the most opportunity for leadership. And I can agree with that, man. I can sympathize with that. My major was in physics. There's not a lot of physics to be done in the infantry.
Not very much, no.
We can talk about like projectile trajectories and stuff like that, but not really. So there will always be time to go back and pursue a master's degree. In fact, I'm doing it right now, right, part-time. So that's just a warning for our cadets. Don't feel like you need to be canalized just because you're majoring in something. You need to force yourself into a certain direction and follow your heart. Okay.
For sure. Yeah, do what would make you best or what will make you happiest, I would say, and fulfill your desire or your I guess adrenaline to accomplish something. Like don't funnel yourself into something just because you studied that at school.
Okay, and the next few questions are going to help us explain how, the decision to branch into the maneuver space infantry has made you a better rounded person. So let's talk about the duty positions that you've held as a lieutenant, and how did being an infantry officer help you succeed in those positions. So let's go back to your time as a platoon leader.
So I got to my unit after the infantry basic officers leaders course, completed Ranger school, got to my unit. Initially, when you get to a unit, you'll do a little bit of staff time depending on the queue and how many personnel are in front of you to take a platoon. So I did 3 months as assistant operations officer, just kind of planning, the battalion level, company level training. Then I took a platoon. I was an infantry platoon leader for 9 months. Had some of the best experiences of my life, without a doubt. And then I served 13 months as a company executive officer. So I did 9 months of that overseas in Europe, and a couple months on both ends back here, stateside in Fort Hood.
Okay, so pretty standard, but I don't want to diminish it by saying standard, but that, a lot of officers and successful officers get the privilege to be a company executive officer. And your three different duty positions are going to help me illustrate a point that I like to drive home with my cadets. And the point is that as infantry leaders, whether infantry, armor, or combat arms in general, we get to have our hands in different pieces of the pie, right? So as assistant operations officer, you're managing and planning operations, right? So direct occupational translation to that would be project management. Okay,
Sure.
easy. Then as an infantry platoon leader, what sort of stuff are you doing day to day that is not, the physical things that we normally associate with the infantry? Because I want my cadets to understand, I want you to illustrate for them how much planning across different domains an infantry platoon leader gets to do.
Yeah, well, for sure. So, as a platoon leader, you're directly in charge of give and take, 30 to 40 soldiers, directly in charge of them, directly responsible for them, and you have non-commissioned officers that will assist you and, for the most part, uh, be more in direct contact with these soldiers. Day to day in the garrison environment, generally you're making sure the soldiers are taken care of, health and welfare. If they have any issues, you make sure that gets taken care of, medical or personal. You're providing advice for these guys. A lot of these soldiers are for the most part in general like out of high school, so they don't really have a plan. And I'd say you get to directly influence young soldiers on their career paths and what they do with their lives in the future, whether they decide to stay in the army or do their time and get out. So I think that plays a huge role, and you kind of don't see it from the outside, but you have a very big part in influencing a lot of soldiers' lives. As far as planning and training, usually your company commander will ask you or task you um, with platoon or squad or team level training day to day and collectively leading up to like a company exercise. So you're directly in charge of planning, whether it's your platoon or your company size, training density, anything from running an M4 range to shooting a gunnery in a mechanized unit, or possibly even helping us and assisting planning platoon level operations, which is more controlled by a battalion level, but you do have some input in that. So there is a lot of planning and executing as a platoon leader.
Okay, and then we'll transition to your time as an executive officer, and let's talk about the roles in property, in sustainment, especially in a mechanized unit, and deploying to Europe with a mechanized unit. So if you can speak to the involvement that you had with any sort of logistical uh, planning for that overseas movement, and then the sort of sustainment planning that an XO is kind of in charge of for operations with a mechanized unit.
Yeah, 100%. And I might in my answer here, I might kind of bleed into maybe some follow-on questions. But they don't really teach you the roles and responsibility at iBullet or in college, ROTC or West Point, of being an executive officer and what you'll actually be in charge of. Your bread and butter as a company executive officer are property and maintenance. So taking care of the commander's property and making sure that maintenance happens on all equipment and all vehicles or anything that's assigned to you at that company level. So for the first part, we'll talk about property. It doesn't really get discussed much in iBullet or to my knowledge in ROTC or at West Point, but it actually plays a huge role as a lieutenant infantry officer, platoon leader, or executive officer. You can be signed for property anywhere from $20 million to $80 million at any given time. Just to give you an example, my company's property book was an average of about $85 million. That my company commander was technically signed for, but I was directly responsible for managing his property. As an executive officer, that's what you do. You take care of the company commander in terms of managing his property and managing the maintenance for the company. So deploying to Europe is no small feat when you have to put $80+ million worth of property on a train, and then make sure it gets on a boat, and then make sure you receive it on the back end, account for everything, and then do that coming back stateside. So you definitely get your fair share of understanding how property works within the Army and how important it is. And now to speak to the maintenance side, so you don't learn any maintenance in IBOLIC or again at ROTC or West Point, to my knowledge. And when you become a platoon leader, especially in the mechanized world, maintenance is important because your senior officers will ask you about how your vehicle's doing or how your weapons are looking in preparation for a range density or something like that. And as an executive officer, you're almost learning the duties and responsibilities of a maintainer or a logistician. And I would say that I had the privilege of learning their job in terms of using websites like GCSS Army to manage and maintain maintenance, and other websites to making sure that parts get ordered and things of that nature. So it's something that as an infantry officer, you don't get taught this, but you kind of find it easier to learn because you've been through tough experiences. And yes, it's not easy to learn someone else's job, but given the experiences you've had in the past, whatever that might be at IBOLIC or at Ranger School, you find it easier to learn someone else's job almost. So I would say it's easier for you as an infantry officer to learn these jobs that a maintainer or a logistician will do, but they can't learn your job as an infantry officer, because what you learn at IBOLIC is or ABOLIC, or it's something that it can't be taught out in a unit. It's what they teach you there, and that's where you get those experiences from. So I definitely learned a lot as an executive officer on the maintenance and the property side.
So that's what I want to expose, right? It's when we watch, I don't know, 13 Hours or name your Hollywood movie that depicts the infantry, we think it's 100% just pulling triggers, right? So people have this misconception that they're going to walk away from their time in the infantry with little to no marketable skills in the sector, and that hurts my heart, because I'm very proud of the growth and development that I received planning operations, having my hand in the maintenance process, right? Because it's my platoon's weapons, it's my platoon's strikers, it's your platoon's Bradley, right? Like, you are the one that is requesting these supplies, that is planning, looking at the operational plan, and then requesting sustainment support based off of that operational plan. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere for maneuver leaders to have their hands in domains such as personnel management, sustainment planning, operations, obviously, and then anything that relates to communications. We are the ones using those systems, so we are experts at using those systems. So
yeah, 100%. And I would add, you'll hear often the term beans and bullets, and it's what ultimately you're responsible for, as a leader, a platoon leader, but really as an executive officer, you're in charge of getting the beans and bullets for your guys at the company level or battery level, whatever that might be. And if you don't plan it, if you don't resource it, you won't have it. So you definitely learn valuable lessons in that, and lessons that you might not necessarily know or think that you will learn as an infantry officer, but or a combat arms officer, but you'll definitely learn if you don't plan or plan for that or resource that during your time.
okay, so I think we did kind of talk about the questions that are up ahead. So if you were to say, I wrote down directly responsible for $85 million worth of equipment, right? You could put that on your resume, and it's very it speaks a lot of volume, right? What are other little bits, tidbits, bullets that you would advertise to a civilian employer based off of your experience as a infantry officer?
Some other little things that I would add is the leadership skills, the tact skills that you learn from leading soldiers. You know, people, you know, high school students who just graduated from basic training and are now in your line units that don't have much guidance. It actually takes like you know, a good amount of skill to make sure these guys end up on the right path. Um, and I'd say just overall leadership traits, leadership skills, and experiences that other branches can't offer you, or it's just more difficult to achieve. For example, you know, being an infantry officer, you're going to get the opportunity to go to Ranger School, and you know, the leadership skills, the leadership tactics that you learn at Ranger School are just can't be taught anywhere else. Like point blank simple, you know what I mean? Um, and something like that is, in my opinion, what a lot of you know, companies in the civilian or the corporate world want in an individual they're looking to hire. Someone with, you know, some leadership skills that has, you know, done realistic tough training, who's got some grit, who's got experience leading soldiers or leading men, women, in whatever aspect. Just because, you know, leaders is what they're looking for.
I agree. So for everybody who's watching the video, if you haven't seen the videos before, I I switched branches. So I was infantry and I transitioned to cyber. And when I was putting in my packet to cyber, I was worried, right? I don't have a computer science background. My major was in physics, but I was a bit comforted by the fact that, all the videos and all the communications that I saw, they said, we will teach you the technical stuff, but what we're looking for is proven leaders. And I don't think there's another place besides the combat arms spaces, particularly infantry, where you can have as many opportunities to really develop that leadership dimension, because you are placed in the toughest conditions and there is much more expected of you than your counterparts in other branches. So I think I directly attribute to my being accepted as a non-computer science background into a cyber branch because of the fact that I was able to succeed in tough environments and succeed in these positions as a maneuver leader. So I agree. Okay. And then finally, what advice, encouragement do you have for a cadet who is contemplating branching into combat arms?
I will say one, if you're you know, if you have any questions or you're not just unaware of um, the actual job that happens on the ground, just ask questions, whatever question it might be, ask. Whether it's, you know, one of your instructors, if he or she may have been that branch, and they can, you know, help you out with the question. But if they're not that branch, they definitely know someone who's in the branch, or, you know, in that job or in that position, that can definitely provide some feedback that can help in your decision making process. But you know, and I'm not trying to seem biased, but I'd say, you know, definitely do it. If you know, if not just something in the combat arms, it's just something you can't get anywhere else. You know, whatever it might be. It's just, you know, tough, realistic training that definitely builds grit that senior leaders in the civilian and the military world are looking for. Um, and ultimately do something that you're passionate about. You know, if you're passionate about leading soldiers, 100%, there's no other branch where you get to lead as many soldiers as you do being an infantry officer. Whether you have, you know, platoon leader or executive officer, or if you're a specialty platoon like mortars, or you know, or scouts, um, you definitely don't get that opportunity anywhere else uh, to lead soldiers and to build this grit, to get these experiences. So definitely go out and do it, but definitely ask questions if you're unsure, you know, about anything. People are always willing to answer any questions you guys might have. So definitely reach out.
Okay. We're gonna go off script a little bit. Don't worry. But I want to have a little bit of a personal discussion about your background, right? So to kind of prime the conversation, I was having this conversation with somebody else this morning. Um, being Hispanic, being an immigrant, was kind of like motivating because I knew I had like not somebody chasing me, but I had a fire. I felt fire. My feet were to the fire, knowing that I had to uh, not let my family sacrifice like go in vain, right? So we go to school, we branch into the infantry, and there's not a lot of people that look like us, to be honest, right? Like at least at the officer level. Um, so what do you say to a cadet who kind of worries maybe, hey, like there's not a lot of Hispanic officers, there's not a lot of black officers to the left and right. Do you have any sort of words of encouragement if they're looking at the infantry and don't see a lot of representation?
Um, I'd start off by kind of answering this, and or adding to your story, I'd say. And the reason why I actually ended up at West Point, when I was looking to enlist, one of the recruiters, it was a Marine Corps recruiter, and I was, telling him my options. I was like, hey, I'm applying to West Point. I'm trying to do this, but this is also an option for me to enlist. To enlist in the Marine Corps. And the recruiter just, straight up told me like, man, like your chances of getting in are basically non-existent. Just enlist in the Marine Corps. And that, at that point, that was like junior year of high school. That definitely lit a fire in me, to pursue the difficult stuff, to do the tough things. Like try and get admitted into West Point, which is like almost unheard of for someone out of South Central Los Angeles, where the high school isn't the best known in the state. Whose parents came here undocumented, and still work just a crazy amount of hours to make ends meet and to put food on the table for us. All that piled up is definitely like fuel for the fire, that pushes me through, that's pushed me through to get into West Point, has pushed me through West Point, has pushed me through Ranger School. More fuel for the fire to get through selection and get picked up. Because in all these little communities, there's not many, like you said, there's not many Hispanics or African American, or name them minority. There's not a lot. You know what I mean? And that doesn't deter me. That doesn't, just like you, it doesn't scare me. It doesn't tell me to push off. If anything, it should fuel you to be, if there's not a first one, to be the first one. You know what I mean? So to help people and guide people behind you, so that, not to make it easier, but so that you can provide them a pathway, and say like, hey, if you do this, or if you work this hard, like you can also achieve, what I'm hopefully or potentially achieving. So definitely don't let it discourage you if you're the first to be XYZ. I'd say just go out there and do it, and do it to the best of your ability. And whatever is your fuel, whatever is your fire, to make it bigger, or to keep filling it up, so that you can, whatever you achieve, it's the best thing that's ever been done.
That was motivating. I think I feel the same way. Like I wanted, not out of the sense of vanity, but I wanted to prove to myself uh, that I could achieve whatever I set my mind to. And if I was the first as a result of that, then good. But I've always wanted to chase, challenges, and this career field has definitely provided that. And as I transition to this new one, looking to learn a lot more. So I would offer the same encouragement, right? Don't be afraid by the fact that or discouraged by the fact that there's not a lot of representation now. It's you making the conscious decision to say, okay, let me add to that, and
Right.
this way for the next generation. So I like that. Thank you for adding that. Okay. Uh, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution to this effort. I'm sure that the cadets that are watching, so right now the only people that are watching are my sophomores, But as this project grows and as it gains traction, it's going to be distributed, and hopefully it reaches audiences across the nation, and it helps cadets make more informed decisions. Like, again, this isn't to, just get everybody to branch infantry. That's not the point. You're going to choose what you're going to choose, but at least you've heard from infantry officers about what they do, and you're not making your decision based off of, you saw 13 hours and now you think that the infantry just, firefights. Or, in my case, you don't, like, local anecdotes, right? Like, my family was pretty averse to me branching infantry, going into the military in general, because their experience coming from Latin America, Colombia, country's been at war for 60 years. So their experience and their perception of the military it's a very dangerous place. And, hasn't been the case for me. So I want the viewers, the cadets who watch this, to just be armed with more information so that they don't make decisions operating from a disadvantage of misinformation. So thank you. You
Sure.
just that mission, and I'm sure that you will serve as maybe an inspiration to one or two cadets out there. So
For
thanks.
sure. Well, thanks for having me, brother. If any other, if hopefully people see the video, and like you said, just make a decision that they ultimately, want to pursue, because deep down that's what they want, not because someone is telling them to, or anything like that. And I hope to see a lot of these cadets in the future.
All right, man. I'm gonna stop recording.